My ex-girlfriend dumped me on our 2-year anniversary, and I was devastated. So, I became a pickup artist, at least for a while. This is my story as interviewed by my friend Zach Columber, a marketing specialist.
The first period I'd like to start with is before your pickup journey. So what was dating like for you during that period? Let's just start there.
Luckily we actually started as friends, and then we kind of grew into each other, and it kind of progressed naturally, which I think is much more rare nowadays, to be able to just start as friends and then something turns into it. It was my first real long-term relationship at that point, and it was great in a lot of ways. Like, she was an amazing person. She was into me. She was smart. She had a lot of great qualities. I think the hardest part was myself. At that point, I was really immature. I was really insecure. And then as I started dating her, part of my story is that like a lot of life changes happened to me, where like my dad got sick and I had to pause my schooling. And I think a lot of that insecurity translated to the relationship. So over time, I started to become more insecure and push it out on her. I stopped trying to be as interesting and adventurous as I was. I became quite jealous at times because she was a social person. She also had a lot of male friends that were also my friends who were related in the circles. And then I think I even became quite a bit controlling, not in a very aggressive way, like you can't effing do this, but little things, guilt tripping. Oh, why do you need to go out? You don't want to hang with me, pity party. So to be honest, man, it was beautiful in the sense of I got very, very lucky to date a woman that was kind and liked me and respected me and was affectionate. But I also saw how much my own insecurities really damaged that relationship and pushed her away. So it was a good learning experience. And in the time, I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. But now looking back, I think it was one of the best things that could have happened to me at that young.
Yeah, I would love to just hear a little bit more about that emotional state of like the insecurity and kind of your relationship with yourself then.
Yeah, I mean, simultaneously, I was an ambivert, right? Like I felt trapped at times of being like a really big nerd at heart and all this, but somebody who liked to really want to be out more and meeting people in this. At the time, I was going to school. My dad was well off. We had a nice life. I felt like that was my identity. And then with that being stripped away, it kind of made me confront who I really was. Like if I don't have my intellect and I'm not on this path and I don't have the support from my parents and it's just me, who am I? And what started to creep in was my fat kid syndrome. Like growing up being overweight most of my life, growing up not being the cool kid. I was never super bullied, but I was never cool and people would talk trash and all that. So really kind of like I started this relationship. I was in a pretty good place because I thought I had everything going well for me. I landed the girlfriend. Then you strip away part of my life and now I'm forced to look at myself and I didn't love who that was. I secretly was still feeling like the fat kid and I felt like I stumbled into a very cute woman who liked me and I couldn't understand why. So I think I felt very unequal. I felt like I had to constantly prove myself. I felt deep down, I think, unworthy of her. And I kind of would test that with insecurities, right? Like, do you like me? Why are you going out here? Why don't you spend more time with me? Because I didn't like me, I don't think. So yeah, I was mostly wrestling with, am I still this fat nerd kid? I don't deserve this person. And I'm simultaneously sabotaging my own relationship because I don't feel good with myself. I don't feel secure in myself.
It sounds like you were kind of like putting her on a pedestal and you're feeling like, oh, like I have to test her or maybe I have to control her so she doesn't be another guy.
And it's funny because it does become a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I saw as the relationship progressed, she was basically like completely adoring me. She was so kind and so into me. And then over the first 6 months, a year, and we were together for about 2 years, as I started pushing these things out on her, I could see the reactions change in her, right? I could see her pull back a little bit more. I could see her become a little bit more hesitant about talking to me about things. And that made me feel more insecure. Like, see, she's going to leave me. And then you get insecure and you push it out and it kind of compounds until I largely think that I pushed her away. And so then after that, you're now sat with the fact that you also crushed your own chances and fucked your own life up because of your own insecurities.
But yeah, what was dating like for you during the pickup years? And what was your like relationship with yourself like during that time?
I first got into it. I'm broken up with this woman. I'm depressed. I'm feeling lonely. And of course, where do you go as a nerd at that point? You go to the internet. Right. And eventually you look up online, like, how do I get back at, I was probably honestly something about getting back with her. And then you stumble upon pickup and it plants the seed of like, okay, I'm a nerd. but there's some way to actually learn this and understand it like I can learn computing or gaming or anything else. This sounds really, really fascinating. And so while I did become good at it, the first few months, I was horrible at it, man. Like I would go out and never talk to anybody. I would doubt myself. I would beat myself up. And then eventually you start taking a little bit of experience and you start maybe talking to some women at an event. You get some of that exposure, it gets a little easier, and you repeat. And then over probably the next 4 years or so, I got quote unquote good at it. Like you said, right? I started to meet a lot of women. I was dating a lot of women. I was hooking up. I was learning all these pickup techniques. And I actually got hired on to a few pickup coaching companies because they caught wind of that, right? In Boston, I'm building a little bit of a social circle. I have a little bit of a name. I'm part of the Boston pickup community and I'm one of the head coaches for it. But the irony is that entire time, I'm thinking about how can I make a persona? It's really now, if I reflect on it, I don't know how much I thought about like, hey, who do these people get to see of Nick? It was more like, how do I sound perfect? How do I be really cool? How do I adopt hobbies or interests that women like? I even used an alias like many of the pickup guys did, which is Nico, which is my Greek nickname. And at the time, you don't think anything's wrong with it, right? You just think this is something I'm learning to tack on. This is a skill. I'm molding my personality to understand how to be good with women. But subconsciously, what you're doing is basically you're saying, forget everything about your actual values, your interests, who you are. And that's not good enough, right? Always the underlying belief is, okay, I need to act this certain way, dress this certain way, talk about these certain things, because that's not cool who I am for the last 19 years of my life. This is the person that's cool. On the surface, it is very rewarding from a practical level. You have women finally talk to you, you have them want to sleep with you, you see them desire you, and you're like, I've made it. But I think for most people, there comes a point where, like you said, you get this experience, you're having this success, and then all of a sudden, kind of the luster wears off with anything else. All right. You don't get that same drive for sex and new sex and validation. And then you're left saying like, if this isn't making me happy like what I thought, what is? And then more than that, you start to really get compounded that like every interaction I have with a woman or a person is in that persona and they like that person and therefore they don't like me. And again, it's compounding that belief. They don't know me. They haven't actually hung out with me. I've never really chilled with a woman, a beautiful woman, and shown up like my nerdy self that I've grown up being for 19 years. And eventually, like, yeah, it just feels terrible, man. It feels awful. I've used the word a lot of times, hollow. Like you sit there and you feel nothing. You're like, I thought sex was going to make me happy. It doesn't. I'm kind of bored with it. I feel like nobody even knows me. I don't feel close to anybody and I hate myself, right? I've done all these things and I've basically obliterated everything about me, but deep down, I know that that exists. I mean, I don't know how much you know, but I played Counter-Strike professionally, man. I ran gaming blogs. Like my background is in computer science. Like I don't want to pretend to be this dude who's not interested in any of that and has to be polished a certain way. So to summarize, I would say it was great. I got some early wins. I'm like, wow, this is the holy grail. And then you realize I'm hiding everything about myself. I'm reinforcing that that person is ugly and nobody ever actually gets to see that person. So nobody likes me. Like you don't even attribute the sex and whatever to you. I attributed it to the lines. Actually, that's a really funny idea. I just realized too, is like you attribute your success to the technique, not to you as a human. Like, oh, wow, this person likes me, but like, oh man, this opener was really good. This routine that works, this conversational routine, that's what women like. So therefore none of it relates to you. Sometimes when you get wins for the wrong reason, it actually feels worse. It's hard to imagine that, but you're like, I'm winning. And the only way I can win is by not being me, which validates I am a piece of shit. So yeah, it was great on a practical level, horrible for my mental health.
It's just that there's different ways to do it. And one way you're going to feel worse and worse about yourself over time. And it's a lot of work. It's like this persona. And the other way is you being you. And so the wins there are going to feel so much different over time.
Totally. And you start to believe in yourself. You're like, right, experience proves like, whoa, I am good enough. And again, you shouldn't tie it to just how women respond to you. But I think when you're starting and you're inexperienced, like it's hard to detach from that. And so when you finally start talking to people a little bit more honestly or a little bit more vulnerably and they like you for it, you're like, whoa, this is cool. Like this beautiful person can appreciate me. And it's a total game changer. I've met a lot of people in the pickup and dating community, a lot. Like I'm talking about from just clients and members, like hundreds and coaches, dozens, and I've worked with them. And a tremendous amount of them were really miserable and depressed. And then after they got that success and they realized it didn't change their life largely, like the success of, attracting lots of beautiful women, I've seen a lot of them get way worse. And I've talked about this on a few retreats. I know a couple of people who've taken their own lives in the industry, which is really hard for me to swallow. Like I knew somebody who was in the Boston community. We weren't great friends, but we were acquaintances, and he was doing it for years. And he's like, I want to date hundreds of women. And then he did. And I can't speak for him of why he took his life, but I think like you're searching for meaning there and you're never going to find it. And when you don't, then you're like, wow, I did all this and I still feel pretty miserable and I still don't love myself. And it's hard to kind of pick yourself back up.
Just based on your story, it's like there were consequences for you and then you had to kind of like build that back up. So it's not a light thing. Like it really does matter.
Something I've been trying to teach men for 14 years that like on the surface, this all seems like, what's a big deal? Why not use some lines over time or whatever? And like you said, I think the self is always listening, and you cannot pretend to be somebody else for a long time or act a certain way or subjugate your values and then not to permeate deeper and affect you on a deeper level. But I think we don't realize that when we're young and immature, we just want the immediate win, right? We're like, who cares? I'm getting laid. I'm saying some cool stuff. Yay. Definitely doesn't provide lasting joy.
Yeah. So what do they get right in your mind? Like, of course, we're not zealots here. We're not saying that like these people are just bad and you shouldn't listen to them. It's just like they're just seeing it the wrong way. And there are some things that get right, even if it's like a twisted version.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest kind of ideas to wrestle with is when there's a lot of truth in something, but woven around things that are not necessarily true or even healthy. Because the pickup community and now the red pill community and future communities that have spawned from it, they've changed a lot of guys' lives in positive ways. I owe so much of this journey and becoming a better person to this idea, right? And a friend once said this to me that has always stuck with me. Let me be not so crass in my language. He said, I've never seen the pursuit of vagina be a bigger motivator to men entirely changing their lives. And I believe that to be true. I think fitness can do it. I think other things. And you see this now with all these movements, the prospect of bedding beautiful women to young men, there's probably no stronger pull. And so I think that seed of, hey, you can control your life more. You can improve yourself. You can better yourself. You can become a more attractive person. Just that one idea alone is so incredibly powerful. And I think I would never talk against those communities for that, because I think that alone will do so much for people. I think the other thing that a lot of these communities of pickup and such get right is a lot of the core principles, right? They're just, like you said, taught in a terrible framework. So for example, I'll just list things. Taking care of yourself, good hygiene, grooming, working on your body language, eye contact, vocal tonality, fantastic. Taking more opportunities to meet new people, putting yourself out there, not taking rejection personally, continuing to try again after getting rejected, fantastic. The idea is that more often than not, women want you to lead, be decisive, flirt, and kind of move things forward. That is absolutely true. That again alone is so powerful because so many guys spend 10 years, they're really friendly, they go on dates or they meet women and they're very kind and they don't want to be a pervert or a creep or whatever. So they restrict their own sexual desires. And then they spend 10 years like, why doesn't ever a woman feel the same way for me? And why does it never turn into a romantic scenario? Is because one, again, most women, especially young women, won't bring it there first and they're waiting for you to do that. But two, a lot of what builds arousal is being desired by another human. So seeing your strength to show your leadership, your assertiveness, that you desire her is what kind of turns somebody on in the moment a lot of the times and creates that connection. So I think that is massively huge as well. So recapping, I think the idea of like working on yourself and you can change your results, fantastic. I think all the underlying principles that are sound in psychology, right? Be more expressive, be more animated, have good body language, understand how to ask better questions, be willing to disagree with people, fundamentally sound. The core belief that you need to, as a man, more often than not, take the lead, take the initiative, and show interest, wonderful. So right there, like you said, is like the 80% of brilliance, right? But then I think it's fundamentally flawed in a couple of primary ways. One, it was always framed into, mold your personality and values into this type of person. Learn this idea, be this, and shift all your personality into that. And what I think was a big change for me is seeing it the opposite way around and saying, okay, how do I take all these principles that I know work and integrate it into my personality? right? So if I want to like ask great questions to somebody, I don't have to like pretend it's about cool random stuff or what I think is interesting for an alpha male. But like if I want to ask her like, hey, are you into philosophy and meditation or personal development? I'm not going to be afraid of asking that, right? I'm going to ask emotional good questions I'm curious about, but it's not the pickup questions, it's the things that interest me. That's number one. I think the other thing is that just the main core of belief is these widespread generalizations about women, especially that because women want these types of men and because women generally have more options, then there's this implication through all this, especially now the newer communities, that women are always practicing hypergamy, which basically they will always find the next best mate. They do not value deep human connection. They will backstab you if you don't keep yourself up all the time. They don't have the same long-term feelings. They can hurt you, all these things. It's framed in a way to men to help them. I think they think to like keep getting these beliefs, right? Keep being more alpha, have abundance, all this. But really it just solidifies like women are horrible people in their mind, and they're less, and they're shallow, and they're shitty, and they're going to hurt you, which I think makes you closed off. But also it makes you reciprocate those behaviors, treat them poorly, keep them at an arm's length, be aloof. And so you kind of create a self-fulfilling prophecy. Either you only attract those types of women who struggle with their own mental health or self-esteem and act that same way, or you sabotage your own connections, and then you prove like, yeah, see, women don't stick around. And I think what I learned to summarize from all this is that we all struggle, man, and we all struggle in different ways, and we all suffer, and we all have dating issues, and we all have emotional issues. And the second you stop pointing the finger at everyone else and you say, we've all got behaviors that we want to improve upon, but that's not everyone. It won't always happen to me. And we're fucking human. We're not mammals purely driven by our fucking id and just like emotional pull. Like, yes, I'm married. I can see a beautiful woman and say, oh my God, and have a fantasy in her mind. Does that mean I'm going to leap and like go have sex with her in an alleyway, like, and cheat on my wife? No. And it's the same thing with like women, man. Like all this red pill stuff is framed as like women are just these hopeless emotional beings and they will just like do whatever their bodies say. But it really downplays the incredible amount of women I've met in my life that are thoughtful, that are caring, that are intellectual, that are loyal, that are driven, that are good family caretakers. And yeah, I just think the answer is like everyone's different. And of course there are trends, but like we're all in the same boat, man. We're all trying to figure it out. We all got the same insecurities. The irony is these communities never look at the behaviors they do themselves. They treat women like objects a lot of times, like meat. They're not considerate, not communicative. And they don't realize like, they're like, these people are assholes to me. And it's like, well, you're treating people pretty poorly yourself. It's horrible all around. So 80% great, 20% awful, just like a lot of, and I'm not saying they're cults, but that's why a lot of cults work. Osho didn't attract a huge amount of PhD people by saying like, you're going to have to clip my toenails and eat them and then give me blowjobs. He said like, I'm going to give you the answers to intellectual pursuit and happiness. And then that stuff's buried within there.
You don't want to create a false persona. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that any belief system that women are fundamentally different and bad compared to men, maybe women are fundamentally different, but different and bad. It just seems like that's not a worldview that's true, or that it's misogynistic by definition. That's what it is. When you believe that women are fundamentally worse than you, you're just hurting yourself because you're cutting off connections from all these awesome, awesome women. Like you're creating your own version of hell where you're only dating other people who are shitty because you're acting shitty.
We even have these red pill podcasts. Like all they have on is like 22-year-old girls with plastic surgery who are IG models. And they're like, that's like literally they have like 500 interviews of podcasts of the same type of person. And I'm like, you're intentionally picking the type of people that prove your beliefs. They're not asking like Dr. Laurie Santos from Yale in psychology.
Yeah, even in the pickup stuff, they say like it's okay to like be fitter and meet more women and do these things. And that's like, there is that positivity of you can do things and your actions have consequences, but you're missing on part of it there.
Yeah, it's so funny when a guy's like, yeah, man, I like slept with 5 girls this week and I ain't calling some of them back. And like, yeah, I'm doing my thing. I'm gonna go meet some new women. And then a girl goes to them and they're like freaking out. And I'm like, you literally just slept with a bunch of people, didn't think twice about talking to them again and just bailed. I think there's a lot of bitterness and resentment and entitlement in a lot of that, which I completely sympathize with. Like if you are like myself, a nerdy, chubby kid, and you get overlooked your whole life, you feel those emotions, right? You just don't know how to like deal with them. You don't know how to work through them or take personal accountability as well. So it's easier to just go to black and white thinking.
Yeah. What was dating like for you after this realization you had that you were like, hey, I want to be me. I want to be authentic. What was dating like for you then? And how did your relationship with yourself change at that time?
So I guess like before I just go into completely how the dating was, let me just explain the just be yourself, because that seems to come up a lot. And I think a lot of people hearing that immediately are like, oh, just be yourself. I've been myself for forever and it never works. It's something more like be your best self, right? And even that might be hard. But what that means for me is to say, okay, I need to understand who I am. I need to start exploring my opinions, my interests, my values, the people I want to surround in my life, what I believe in, and start to understand what that is and test it. Go explore that in the world. Talk about those things. Go try hobbies. And I think experience is the best teacher. So you start to do honest self-reflection and accountability. And you say, okay, here's who I am. Here's what I like. Here's what I think I want or what's going to make me happy. Let me validate that in the real world. So you start exploring and you test it and you say, I didn't love this hobby. I don't really want to do this. Or, hey, I thought this would be fun, but not so much. Or something unexpected becomes really important to you. I was never an athletic kid in my whole life. I hated the idea of sports. I wasn't after school, like doing that. Now I love it, man. Like I play basketball, I hike, I run, I'll play anything. And you have to kind of work through those beliefs and get those experiences and then keep doubling down on that and making sure that your actions continue to align with that integrity. That's how you find your best self. And you realize, wow, I love still talking about my intellectual pursuits and it's really important to me and so forth. So when we say be yourself, it is the journey of accountability, introspection, testing what you think you are, and then letting experience guide you and continue to be in that integrity and grow and compound that over time. I think who I am now is a lot different than even who I was 5 to 7 years ago and much different than the person I was 10 to 15 years ago. And I hope that 10 years from now, I'm a lot different than I am. It's always a work in progress, right? So I think the journey of when it started to change, I've written about this story where I just remember one night, I think I was like with a client. We were out and he was having some success. And funny enough, I wasn't, which happens, man. Like, it's funny. A lot of coaches won't talk about this, but you go out with a couple of clients and yeah, in general, I'm pretty good at talking to people and attracting people. But inevitably, not everyone's going to like you. And so he was having a great time. I think at the end of the night, I was trying to talk to someone. I didn't hit it off. And I was feeling really, really down because, I'm like this coach and I'm putting on all my best game and it's still not working. And this guy who's relatively new had a great night and had a lot of fun. After he went home, I just remember like starting to walk out and it was like a quick realization. It was almost like, I don't know, ego death where I'm just like, I hate this. I hate everything I'm doing. I hate the person I'm becoming. Why am I doing this? And as I'm like going through this, I'm walking out and I see a woman standing there and she had some really cool, interesting leather jacket or something. And I'm a weirdo. I've always had a lot of punk friends, goth friends, and she was kind of a little edgy. And I just like for the first time without consciously thinking of a line, I just leaned into my feelings and I like really looked at her and I said, hey, that jacket's like awesome. It's really badass. I love it. Not even, polished, like loose and kind of with my lighter voice. Like I just was like, whatever. And I remember she lit up and she was so excited to talk about it. And because I was already present with this person, I just kept leaning into it and talking about weird music habits and whatever. And I think the experience showed me like it just continued. We hit it off all night. I think we went to drink somewhere else. And like the process of starting more present and just like leaning into that vulnerability allowed me to continue. And it was the first time in a very long time I felt like I had an honest conversation with a beautiful woman. And it felt so rewarding. Like it felt liberating. I felt no anxiety about what's the next steps. I saw her really like me and be curious about who I was. And like one real true experience like that, like solidified in my head. I was like, I'm done with everything else. Like this has to be the only way to do this. It is so much more fun, so much less stressful, and so much more personally rewarding. And you saw the contrast. I'll just say like, I still had that with a few friends. I think I changed a lot, but even with a couple of core friends, you have those nuggets of like, I'm still me, right? And it feels good. That's why they're your best friends, right? And you can have the moments of being whatever and weird and not done up and all that stuff. And to be able to translate that to the real world with beautiful people and strangers felt so immensely freeing and powerful. So yeah, it became a drug. I was like, I got to figure this out. I got to take all the stuff I learned. I got to flip it on its head and say, instead of boxing myself into this, who the fuck am I? who's this person and how can I make sure that I'm tacking this personality on that ground foundation of good ideas. Still stand tall, still be open to expressing myself and all these things, but in my own way. I left most of the pickup community at that point. I stopped working with a lot of like the pickup coaches and all that because at that point I'd been kind of soured anyway. I saw a lot of terrible stuff, man, in the industry and people doing a lot of really shady things that you kind of overlook because again, you're like, but I'm getting laid, so who cares? And yeah, it felt amazing. And then very, very quickly, it's funny how fast my growth, I think, accelerated at that point. I never really grew. You think you grow in the skill side of things, right? Like you're like, yeah, I'm so good at like presenting, but you don't grow as a human. I think those moments where you look at another person and you really show up to them and you can be judged, that does so much more for you to grow and be more confident, actually confident around human beings than years of doing it another way. So very quickly, I just leaned into that. I said, I'm quitting other companies. I want to start my own coaching company. Nobody at the time had kind of thought of it this way. There was other companies that were claiming to be natural, but it was still pretty structured and like whatever. And it became the most fascinating thing in the world to me. From that moment on, I believe that was the right answer. I believe it was the answer for most people that I knew deep down that I just didn't want to face because it meant being really exposed. But it felt great, man. I started meeting women that I liked. I started attracting women that were more like me. I forgot how much of the type of people I liked in my life. I really loved intellectual people, warm-hearted people, nerds, intellectual debates. And I think I threw out all that out the window just to be like with pretty girls, no matter who they were. And then I really started to like click with the types of people I liked. It kind of brought me back to my childhood. I remember one time like breaking down in the street and crying because I had felt so good about this that I almost forgot who I was as a child. I forgot what it was to be present even, right? You kind of forget what it is to not be in your head and not be somebody that you think you should be, but to actually just hang out with somebody. Like when you're a kid up until 13 and you have no sense of self, and even in my early teenage years, you don't think about your own ego and your own external validation. You're just being, and it feels so fucking great. So yeah, it was a drug. It happened fast. I started attracting a lot more women that I really clicked with. I grew immensely as a person. And then I started my own practice and I said, this is the answer. I think if I could help men do this, I would not only help people change in a more positive way, but I would also facilitate more great human connections, even for casual sex. And I still did have casual sex after that. Something that a lot of the pickup and whatever red pill stuff says, if like suddenly you talk about being human or vulnerable or whatever, like that must mean you're either like a wimp or you're just going to be like a beta who's like settling for a relationship. Like I was still being casual for quite a while and having fun with it. But I think even if you have casual sex, but you show up more like this, it becomes so much better, 1,000 times better, even for casual times. And women will tell you that. One of the best compliments I tell guys that I've heard from a few women is like some variation of like, I feel like I've known you in 2 hours more than I know somebody for 2 years. And that's a wonderful feeling.
It's chill. It's relaxed. It's like a friend that you have awesome sex with. Like, isn't that an awesome idea, right?
It's the best. By far and large, the best guys I've met with women are not involved in this. I have like one friend that always comes to mind, and he was that balance of like, he knew who he was, I think largely, so he didn't have a lot of ego, and he was very nice of a human being. And guys are so scared of this word nice. He was a fucking nice person. He was caring, he was compassionate, he was a good family person, he was close to his family, and like he cared about getting to know women. But also at the same time, he was very comfortable with his sexuality and showing that. And that dude, like, I mean, he slept with like half our high school class, man, like even casually. And then after in college, like, and I never really like took it to heart until after, like I didn't appreciate it because I'm like, all right, maybe because he's like saying something suave, or I thought there was some other thing. And like, then you realize like, he's a pretty good dude who's not afraid to be honest and lean into it and tell a woman like, hey, I think you're beautiful. I want you, and have that strength. I'll be honest. Like that's the irony is like those types of guys, I think will get way more, even if they want casual sex, than a dude trying to be a pickup artist or a red pillar, because there's so many deeper reasons we can't get into. But like women are smart, man. Like a lot of them are emotionally intelligent, and they can tell when you're putting on airs, when you got an agenda, when you're being a chameleon, and they can also tell when you're pretty relaxed and open and whatever. And then they're going to drop their guard. And then you combine that with like showing them, flirting with them and arousing them. They're going to give themselves to you freely without like, like so much of pickup is like, you need to push her to convince her to have sex with you and like get this and whatever. I've learned that if you need to convince a woman to have sex with you, you're doing something wrong. Like she should be excited to and feel like, I'm cool with this dude. We're hitting it off. He's hot. I feel pretty good that he's not going to be a scumbag and hurt me right now. I want to sleep with him. So yeah, I think it's not only like this higher than thou way, I actually think it yields much, much better results.
You know, the pickup guys are like out there running and running basically to have these experiences and pushing the women versus the women almost like coming to you and you're just expressing yourself honestly and then it just happens.
Men really want to believe that all these little micro skills of like, well, do I ask her the question this time? Or do I ask, move it forward this time? They think that's what they need to learn to be largely successful. And that shit is like so insignificant in the grand scheme. These bigger values, these ideas of leading and expressing yourself and what it means to ask good questions and be curious and present and all that, that is so immensely powerful that if you get it right, a woman's not going to be like, this dude who's super cool, interesting, forward, fun, sexual, all this. He timed his like statement wrong. So yeah, never mind. Fuck this dude. Like, no way, man. So like all these micro things that guys obsess with for years and they think that's the key. And then they just overlook that they're not doing the real work, right? And that's the stuff that really, makes a huge difference. And then even with approaching, I've used lines and whatever, and you talked about women are intuitive and like picking up on this. Women can tell like when you're spitting a line or you said something a million times in your head, it's just a gut feeling. We can tell when somebody's a little off, when they've got an intention, when they're being a little disingenuous. And also it comes across in our behaviors, right? Our body language, our eye contact. We do all these little things that we don't realize when we're bullshitting or when we're putting on airs, and people just sense it. And so like, if you're a guy who's terrible and has none of these leadership or presence skills, you'll get bad results. If you're like a pickup guy who's well practiced, you'll sometimes get some results. And then I think like, if you look at my game, when I go talk to women, and I've talked to, 20,000 women over my life with clients and myself around the world, you watch us walk up to a woman at a venue or at a park or something. It is very casual. It is not trying to be always over the top and need to be the loudest person in the room. And in fact, I do something now that I've been doing for a long time that most coaches never say to do. I will often walk up to a group of girls, let's say like a group of women with clients, or somebody sitting on the grass or at the beach. And I will walk up to them, I'll say an honest comment, and then I'll check in with them and say something like, hey, listen, we'd love to keep talking. I just want to make sure you're cool with that, or we're not interrupting. And it's not starting with that, like begging for permission, like, could I come talk to you? It's leading and saying like, I want to come talk to you. I want to start a conversation, and then checking in with their comfort. And every pickup guide, and still to this day, every guy would be like, that's a chump move. And what they don't realize is that move is secret, by the way. It yields an insane success rate because immediately the women are like, this dude had the guts to walk over. And then he's socially aware that he doesn't want to also like impose, not in a nervous way, like if you have good body language, but he's also conscious of our social boundaries. And therefore, if he's doing that, he must be a cool dude. He must be all right. He must be a good dude who's also confident. And the success rate is like, I realized that probably 5 years ago at one of our retreats, and it has been amazing. Just like being a human and saying, I want to talk to you, but I don't want to interrupt if you guys were talking. Would it be cool if we sat down? And most women are like, you know what? Fine, great. And then guards are dropped and you're in, and the success rate skyrockets. So yeah, I think doing it this way, even on a practical level, if you don't give a shit about any of the moral side of things, I think you will end up much, much more successful.
And I think another thing that speaks to is that with your approach, it's not like there aren't any tactics. There's a few things that like, you're like, hey, yeah, there's a few things you should remember. It's just like, if you're learning to make friends, most of it's going to be about being authentic, but like there's some pointers and there's some rules of unspoken social behavior. So it's not that you're not going to learn these things working with this approach. It's just that it's on a foundation of being you versus being this fake person.
Yeah, it's like, hey, in general, you should lead with women. Here's how you make a lead. And here are some examples of that. What do you want to tell her that you want to do together and lead her to? Go somewhere else. Rather than, here's what leading is, say this line. That's it. And so there's still a lot of structure. There's still a lot of practical frameworks. Just at the end of that last 10% is, okay, you understand this concept, figure it out for yourself. Tap into your creativity. And that's also what makes your results so much better is every time you memorize and you repeat, you're not actually learning, right? You're not becoming more dynamic. Why are people that are taking improv, for example, get so good at expressing themselves? Because they're forced to dig and come up with it. When you're like, cool, here's what a forward compliment should look like. Here's some examples. Great. What do you want to tell this woman that you like about her? And you really start to think about that. Then you build your own values, you build your own self-assurance, and you become infinitely more creative. I can walk up to a woman or a person right now and basically start a conversation about anything in the environment naturally without even thinking about it and it to be real. And guys see that and they're like, you have something that I don't. And I'm like, dude, I fucking drank Mountain Dew bottles and steak and cheeses and Doritos and sat in my room with my headset on for 10 years of my life and never talked to a woman in the real world. It is because I challenge myself to cultivate that. That's it. But if you never drop that guard and you're like, cool, I have this line that's fucking amazing, then it never changes. Here's how I know somebody who's not great with women, at least in the level that I would judge them with, or a person, is when I see a coach that is on YouTube or anywhere, and 5, 10 years, 15 years into their career, they're walking up to women and they're saying the same things that they did 10 to 15 years ago. Immediately, I'm like, it's over. You're not a human. You're basically a lizard in a skin suit at that point. And like, I don't mean that as to be mean, but like, it's not that fucking hard to be dynamic. And like, people idolize people like that, where they're like, wow, he walks up and he says this thing that he said for 15 years to thousands of human beings. The implication there is you're never making a connection. If I've said the same thing and the same progression to thousands of people in my life, I've never had a real moment, right? Or I have very few real moments.
As far as the sex, so for me, I think I noticed a difference between the sex when I was maybe trying to perform versus like more of, we'll call it connection sex. So this is the juicy part. Gotta save the juice to the end. Would you say there's a difference between your pickup artist years sex, like that experience for you in terms of how you felt, and afterwards when you're more authentic?
I mean, 3000%, man. When I was young and immature as a pickup artist, right? There's a few ideas that run through your head. One, I need to be, just like everything else, I need to learn all the right things to do. The right structure, what turns them on there, which inherently creates a lot of anxiety. It disconnects you from your body and all the feelings you feel. If I'm like focused on like, all right, I gotta like turn over this way or do this thing or look this way, your brain has a hard time like also connecting to your emotions when you're super heady, right? And being present in the moment. That's the whole point of mindfulness. And then two, it was so much more about my appearances and looking like a good lover and being confident and really, you know, her seeing me a certain way. The irony is like, you learn that technique matters very little. Like, of course you need some basic technique, and that actually the best way to turn a woman on is not to figure out how to press her buttons all the right way, not to appear a certain way, but actually to be present with each other and share those emotions so she can see, like, for example, the hottest thing most women tell you that they want in a dude is to feel his overwhelming desire, right? It's the basis of every like romance novel and sex scene in romance novels. And if you're in your head and like thinking about that, you don't really get to that point. But when you're with a woman, you look her in the eyes and you're feeling her body and you feel close to her. And you're like, fuck, I'm like having so much fun with her. And then you want her and you let that surge in you. You tap into fucking National Geographic shit, right? Like, it's just primal. You feel each other's energies. She can sense your desire and emotion. I've always said this, like, we all want sex deep down, right? Except for the 1% or so of asexual people, which is fine. But everybody's a freak deep down, man. And when you like stay to that surface level and you don't get very emotional and you don't get close, even for casual sex, and you don't feel each other's emotions and look at her and tell her, I want you so much, and to feel it, and she can feel that sincerity, you never get to that true depth of unlocking like her dropping her guard, being really in touch with their emotions, feeling a higher level of emotion. Like when you look at studies of women that don't orgasm, right? It's very rarely off of technique. Most women can orgasm alone in bed with themselves through masturbation. But the 30% or so odd women that can't during sex, it's because they're not present. They're not fully connected to those emotions. They're worried. And so if she feels you're the same way, she'll never get there. But the second you connect to your emotions, you drop it, you share those moments, you can be vulnerable. She feels way more emotion. She gets way more turned on. Orgasms are way more frequent in general. Some people still struggle. And then because they trust you and you're dropping that guard together, they will start to explore their sexuality with you. And I think this is something that really changed after pickup is, you know, most guys will have sex with women, they'll have drunken hookups or whatever. But like, can you get a woman to really open up about everything? To show you her body in every angle, to feel comfortable, to explore new things, to really show you her freak. Like everyone's got their weird kinks. And when you start getting emotional and you focus on being present, that's when you start to what I call unleash the beast. And I think if you've never had that with a woman, you think you've had great sex. I don't think you've had great sex. And this is not some Nick Notas bullshit. I mean, in Eastern philosophy, tantric practices, for example, have been studied for thousands of years, right? And that's basically what it is. So yeah, before I thought I was a great lover, I was cool, I would say the right things, I'd be in my head, I'd appear a certain way. And it was cool. Like, I was probably better than a dude who was really nervous and not doing it, but I was never really allowing us to be truly emotional, present, and vulnerable, and like ugly. You know, sex should be ugly and funny sometimes where you guys are sweating. You're not worried about it. You're like fucking pulling each other's hair. You're kissing. You're like, I want you. Everybody's sloppy and then laughing. That's when you feel amazing, man. And yeah, I wish more men got to experience that. Honestly, I wish more women had the pleasure too. I mean, there's tons of studies of many, many women. I don't know the exact percentages, but a tremendous amount are not satisfied in their relationships. And it's not because of technique. It's not because the guy doesn't go long enough, right? It's not like, oh, the reason why I'm unsatisfied is because he doesn't last 30 minutes. Like most women don't care about that. I have never really felt like I could be myself. I don't feel like we connect. I don't feel vulnerable. I don't feel like I can be my kinky self. I don't feel like we're really like feeling each other's desires. I mean, one of the hottest things in the world is to like just make deep eye contact and look at each other, especially when you're getting closer to climax and like really focus on those emotions and feeling each other, right? So yeah, it's not great sex for anybody when I was a pickup artist, and now it's gotten substantially better when I've actually been more of a human.
If you want more sex and better sex and also to feel better about yourself, the authentic approach is really the only way to go. It's the way.
It's kind of like being with your best friend, your guy friends. Let me clarify. Like you said, like if you're having sex and you're never thinking about like, do I look ugly? Am I doing the right thing or whatever? Like that's the best, right? When you literally spend 30 minutes with someone and you are completely with each other and chilling and not even reflecting on your own, how you look or what's going on, wonderful. And that's like the best moments you have. Like you sip whiskey with a friend from 1 to 4 a.m. and you guys have a heart to heart. You're probably never retreating back in your head. What do I say to this guy? How do I look interesting? It's just fucking connection. And it's the same thing in the bed. It is so much more of a memorable experience for life.
I mean, definitely throughout my life, the desire when you're not getting laid at all, it's just your DNA. It's like, I will motivate you to do anything possible to make this change. You need to procreate. You need to date. And
spread the seed.
Yeah, exactly. But then it's like you can harness that and use that to have these amazing human moments. It's like the primal part of you and the human part of you. They're both having a great time.
Yeah, it's amazing, man. And you made me think of one final thing. I think what's the saddest thing about what I see with a lot of the modern men's movements, and again, I'm not saying that this is for everybody and everybody should have this. It's wonderful, whatever type of lifestyle you want to have. You want to have casual sex. I have plenty of friends that are in their 30s now and still no plan of marriage, and I'm super happy. But in general, without doing it this way, it's very unlikely you'll feel true mutual love. And it's really sad if you've never felt in love with somebody. You know, for most of our life, even men, the most famous artists, masculine artists, the Rolling Stones, like we talked about love and this emotion and this great feeling and how it was the pinnacle of life is one of these emotions to share. And through these movements, I think that's one of the biggest things. And just in general with young people, when there's studies now, people don't believe love exists anymore. They don't believe it exists. They don't believe it's possible. And they don't see its value because they've never felt it. And if you've never felt truly in love with a woman or had somebody love you for you, even if it's not a long-term relationship, it's quite sad, man. And like, I think if you're going by Eastern philosophy, there's only 2 paths in life, right? Love and fear. And if you're living in the fear of judgment and women are going to hurt me and I've never been close and fuck them and red pill stuff, then like, I think you live a pretty empty life at times. And I think falling in love is one of the greatest things, even if it's fleeting and casual and whatever, but you have to show up for it to happen.
I love that love and fear comment because it is a central choice. And I think that it kind of represents the worst parts about like pickup and red pill. It's like you have this fear that women are going to hurt you. So you create this whole belief system to try and protect you, but then you cut yourself off from one of the most amazing parts of being alive. So you're hurting yourself so badly and you may not even know it. You probably don't.
It's really cool that you said that, man. A few people have said it that I respect. Rumi, the old philosopher and poet, but Brene Brown for Modern Reference, she says you cannot selectively numb. You selectively numb all these feelings and connection and be aloof and people are going to hurt me, so I'll create this barrier. You also numb your ability to actually be in love with somebody or feel that deeper connection. So they think when you're in these movements and doing these things, you think you're succeeding, you think you're getting what you want, and you think you're protecting yourself. And in reality, you often don't let anyone get close and you never feel these deeper, powerful emotions.
I'm laughing because I had some emotion come up there. If this is just like my journey was like in college, I was like, if I get a 6-pack, I'll be worthy of love. Without it, like I'm nothing. I never got the 6-pack, but I've had, now I've had the experiences I really want to. And it just shows you, like, you think that You need to be this other person. And I was so numb to all of my emotions. I was like, I feel bad, but beyond that, angry, sad, frustrated, no idea. Yeah, it's a powerful journey for sure.
I'm glad you went through the journey too, man. And it's, I know you were in it for a long time, but like, look how much joy you have coming on in this call and with this new relationship you're in and how excited you are and how wonderful of a feeling that is. And like, of course, those people can hurt you and whatever. You didn't just go around living life like that. You gain the strength and the courage and confidence to show up and be honest and be connected. And if something happens, you also have the courage and self-love to endure that rather than, put up all these barriers and these, techniques to prevent that from happening.